All right, let's move on to the group chat. This is just our general discussion about an ongoing news story. And guys, I have to ask you, I guess I would title this discussion: Is that an exploding Galaxy Note 7 in your pocket, or are you just happy to see me?
That was really lame.
Yeah.
No, I thought that was good.
Really.
Dad jokes.
We're on fire.
Hashtag dad
totally
jokes.
on fire. But yeah, the Galaxy Note 7 has been kind of a disaster for Samsung at this
So
point.
unfortunate.
Samsung lost something like 20. How many millions of market value?
Billions.
Yeah,
Billions.
26 billion. something.
Billions.
It was,
of market value.
when stock figures shift, that is a massive amount of money shifting. So it's kind of imaginary, but it's also real value. That's how investors look at these
But
companies.
it's going to lose a lot of money having to replace all these. devices.
Potentially people moving. I've seen a lot of people just saying, oh yeah, I'm going to give up on this phone, maybe go to another Android phone, or maybe even go over to an iPhone altogether. It's just really weird sitting in the airport this week and hearing
You can't.
warnings, about specific models of the phones. This has never happened before.
And even on New York City subways. Too.
Even on New York City subways. But we haven't seen a product recall at this scale before. I know the whole
In the
Honda
tech industry.
well, the Honda airbag thing was kind of a big deal. The car industry has had a couple issues, and those things also potentially endanger lives. But people have been injured by these. Who knows what happens if this explodes on a plane or something. What is going on here, guys? So we heard about this when? The end of August?
Yeah,
The
so
first reports appeared?
Quick timeline. At the end of August, there's first some reports that Samsung was delaying some shipments to do additional testing. A couple days later, they officially stopped selling it, issued a voluntary recall. And since then, we've seen things like the FAA offering, its advisors in New York saying don't bring on the subway. They're working with the Consumer Product Safety Commission now.
For an official U.S.
Right,
recall,
and that's happening. Actually, as of the 21st, they are now officially replacing them. So if you have one that you bought earlier, you can get it replaced now.
And I saw there's a software update going out too, so that they're limiting the battery life,
Right.
so it only charges to a certain point. Because the issue is that I guess the newer, bigger batteries in the Note 7, they can overheat if it gets charged too quickly, or I don't even know if they know the exact reason at this point.
overcharged or something.
Overcharged,
Yeah.
And also the software update says if it knows you don't have a replaced phone, it'll say don't charge this phone, be careful with it, get us in for a
and
replacement.
I think the new phones, they have a colored battery
Yep.
indicator that's green that shows
So-
you.
It's okay.
It's really, we haven't seen a company go to this level to deal with a recall, but do we have a sense of why this happened? Was it just because it was rushed?
I think so. I feel like someone, Bloomberg or one of those sites, publications, published a story recently saying that they heard that the iPhone 7 was not going to be that big of a change, and they wanted to sort of press the advantage there. So they maybe rushed things or went a little further with the capabilities of the Note 7. So I think specifically, when we're talking about the battery, it's got a 3,500 milliamp hour battery.
We were really psyched about the battery before we knew he knew it was
Right,
explosive.
yeah. That was it was much larger than the previous year, I think by 500 milliamp hours.
And
so that's
the Notes
not
are known for having very large batteries in general. So,
But I think that they just, from an engineering perspective, are trying to do more than they could safely with this battery. I don't know about the replacements. I wonder if they're going to cut capacity, or they haven't talked
probably
about
the safer
that.
thing to do. It'll be interesting to see, I guess, what the fallout of this is. Will Samsung just blame their battery manufacturer, or will they, is it something to do with the fast charge technology? That's something Qualcomm's been pushing for years. And I think Samsung and a handful of other Android makers have been the ones actually taking advantage of it.
Yep.
But there's danger to that, too, because then you're pushing more voltage in. Anything related to power is dangerous, I guess. And it kind of shows, you have to be a little more careful.
I mean, so first of all, Samsung should never even have let this happen. They should have been more careful with their checks and everything. But,
Yeah.
I mean, looking at how they handled the recall, looking at the timeline, it looks like they stopped selling the Note 7 2 days after the first reports show up. I don't know how long ago before the first reports showed up that they've already known about this
Right.
happening.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's a quick turnaround time. But publicly, it seems they could have done it day off, I feel like, but 2 days isn't bad.
It seems they did fast.
It was
for
pretty
what they did,
fast
yeah.
for what it was.
I'm still unclear on why the CPSC
Took a
took so
while.
long,
Yeah.
and I don't think that makes Samsung look good, even though I don't think that's necessarily
Their fault.
I'm still unclear on why there was such a big gap. That official recall in the U.S. didn't happen until September 15th.
I guess so. Samsung announced their recall. Maybe there was some paperwork. I don't know. Maybe they didn't know they had to go through.
It's the government.
consumer
They
group,
always
yeah.
slow things down, right?
But I almost feel
Yeah.
also like they were trying to figure out if it was isolated incidents
Yeah.
or is it a line-wide defect, right? So but that again is still a long delay for that to
So what are you guys seeing, like in terms of, have you talked to readers or other people who have been considering the Note 7 and kind of are moving away or anything? And where do you think Samsung's going to go from here? Because people will remember this. This is going to be an ongoing joke for years.
Oh, for real! Like
Yeah.
the next Galaxy S phone that comes out,
Yeah.
the opening weekend sales just aren't going to be as good as they have been in the past, and it's really sad because Samsung was finally gaining some momentum against Apple this
That's
year.
true, yeah.
And I talked about this earlier, like last week too.
And the S7s are good phones.
They're
Very
so
good
good.
phones,
The
yeah.
camera's still perhaps better, or maybe
Better
even
than
on
the
par than
6S for sure, yeah.
than the 6S, maybe even the 7. We'll have to
Yeah.
see. But I think this, unfortunately, it just means Samsung really has to step it up next year, and they have to be very open about their battery tech in their next announcement event.
And hasn't Samsung always, I feel like they've generally been criticized for build quality as well. So maybe this is a
And
better
previous-
sign.
I think this is different than
to do it.
build quality.
Yeah.
though.
Well,
This is
it's-
like
it's-
technological underpinnings
For
exploding.
sure, for
It's
sure.
different than kind of plasticky phones, right?
It all comes down to how you're manufacturing things and the care and the quality you're putting into that.
To your
right?
point, they
Yeah.
have had another small little kerfuffle or embarrassment this year with the S7 Active not really meeting Consumer Reports'
Yes.
ratings for
Yes.
waterproofness. So it's their second thing this year, in a year where they're supposed to be gaining steam. So, I mean, as a person who's rooting for the Galaxy line, I'm very disappointed.
And as someone who, if not writes reviews, edits
Yeah.
all these reviews, I cringe anytime I see these because our job is to review these
Yeah.
phones. And, the Note
Yeah.
7, I have
Yeah.
to say, was one of the highest scored products. We've since pulled the score, and we have a disclaimer on our own review. But on the one hand, we're testing these devices, and if they don't explode, we're not going to write about it. Unless, if we're testing them and nothing explodes, we're not going to write
Right.
about an explosion.
Right.
Again, we've since updated the review, but I wonder, are we going to have to be a little more
Take more
cautious
time,
and a little more
test
muted
things
when we
longer.
test
Try to
future
explode things.
flagships?
Try to explode the
Try
net.
to push them to
I
their
guess
limits.
and you can only do so much too,
Yeah.
right? So
I mean,
Yeah.
we're like the second level of testing for these phones before they really reach
Right, we're not the
consumers.
primary
Yeah.
layer of testing.
So we the onus isn't fully on us. There's not much that we can do beyond trying to be a real user to test these phones out. But you're right that in future, I mean, thank our Lucky Stars that Velasco didn't get an exploding Note
Yeah.
7. Although,
It would have made a great story.
it's okay. I know
Wouldn't mind
Cherlynn
if
really,
he
really
got
just
hurt.
wants to
I really wouldn't
erase
mind if he got
Velasco.
hurt.
What's popping?
you know what that guy needs in his life?
An
Third-degree
exploding phone.
burns.
He
Third-degree
does.
burns.
I was just going to say,
It's
I
getting
think
dark, guys.
You shouldn't listen to
All right.
this.
I was going to say that I think that this underscores battery tech in general.
Oh,
and
yes.
the problems that we're having trying to make it better. The battery life on my year-old phone is just terrible right now, and it's super frustrating. But then you hear about things like exploding batteries, and it's like, man, this is a really difficult challenge
Yeah.
these companies have sort of painted for themselves.
The solution right now is to cram in more density, and that introduces power issues
Yeah.
and heat issues.
We're talking about density, we're talking about fast
sure.
charging. All these things are making an unstable thing more potentially unstable, right?
Anything else you guys want to add about the
Well,
Note
maybe
7?
that should be my last point. Was that maybe that should be the next frontier, not thinner phones, but better battery life, and I
Not
guess
exploding phone.
better and safer battery life.
Right.
But I do wonder if there have been some misplaced priorities.
Well, I feel like we say this every year, right? Like, we don't need the iPhone to be 2 millimeters thinner. Like, I feel like the size of the 5S was totally fine.
And the 7 isn't thinner, so
right, it's just
yeah.
true.
Yeah.
I mean, really quick, because we were talking about whether we've seen anything like this before. I mean, exploding batteries have always been a thing with laptops as well in the past. It's just that people don't carry
Dell
them
had
in
a
their
whole
pockets.
thing, I remember,
Yeah.
years ago.
So this is like a much huger deal just because people are carrying them around all the
Yeah.
time.
Okay,
so,
well,
yeah.
we will be following this issue
For
for
sure.
sure. I think for the foreseeable future too.
Yeah.
It's this is one of the more dramatic things to happen in the tech world for a long time. But let's close it out. Thank you for joining me, guys. I'm sorry I'm not Uncle Terry, but he'll
I'm
be back
glad.
next week.
Uncle Dev is just fine.
Yes.
Not really. Uncle
Sure.
Def is not my favorite. I'm sorry.
Nah, it doesn't have the same ring to it.
Well, where can we find you guys on the internet? Just if people want to follow you and your snark and your opinions.
Check out all my subtweets on @Cherlynn
Cool.
Low.
Okay.
I am at Dana Wollman on Twitter. That's my full name, no space. Be nice.
I'm at Nate Ingram on Twitter. be as mean as you want.
Just be me. Well, you also have the safety filter turned on, right?
I do, yes.
So
Oh.
you won't see
Because I
those.
wrote about Battlefield.
I am at Devindra on Twitter, and follow me there for also lots of talk about movies and stuff. But yeah, send any questions, complaints, suggestions about this podcast to podcast@engadget.com. Don't forget to rate us on iTunes, and check out Engadget next week as we're updating our massive election guide following the debates that's happening this week as well.
Yep.
And before we go, our comment of the week. How much for the Mohawk add-on?
A
How
very
much, indeed?
important question.
Apple
Makes you
pay
think.
for it.